I'm going to check the website and see whether it's, yes, I think it's on already. It's streaming now.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes, so good. Then you just, next you just do recording.
Okay, and I'm gonna do record to the cloud.
Yep, that's all you need to do.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to let our guests enter the room? Okay. I'm going to let our guests in.
The secret. Rumors about her. Obama exploded. It was World War III. This crazy love triangle, kidnapping, potential murder. This is Heather's life.
Sherry, whenever you're ready, I think we're ready to begin.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Sherry Karamides, Executive Director of AOTA, and I want to welcome all of our members who are attending this evening and our candidates as well. We have roughly 2 hours together, a chance for you to meet your candidates for your officer positions and members of the Board of Directors. And while we certainly don't have enough time to spend a lot of time getting to know all the candidates, at least it will give you an opportunity to see them face to face, to hear their voices, and to hear some of their concerns as it relates to AOTA.
And being able to walk to the downtown district for the rest
if you would please mute your microphones, we're getting some feedback.
More and more time outside. I would love to just be able to step outside and have spring space and places for fishing and play.
Emily.
Thank you. Sorry for that interruption. I also want to acknowledge the excellent work of the VLDC in the whole nomination process, and I especially want to recognize Rebecca Argabright Grove, our staff liaison to the VLDC, the contact for all of you as part of this process for all her diligent work. I also want to let you know that helping us tonight on technical issues is Junhua Liu, who is AOTA's Vice President of Technology. So if you have any issues, if you type it into the chat box, we'll try to respond to any troubles that you might be having. I know we are also live streaming to YouTube, and I want to welcome all of our attendees that are here this evening. Just to let you know what's on board, we're going to begin with some time with our officer candidates, beginning with our candidate for president-elect and our 3 candidates for vice president. And we'll have an opportunity to address some questions to them. Then we will turn to our vice presidential candidates, and we have a series of questions that we'll pose to each of them. I will be introducing first the officer candidates, and that will be followed in the second segment with the introduction of our vice presidential candidates. We also thank you for the questions that you submitted in advance. We reviewed them and we tried to aggregate them into major themes and topics. We couldn't get to all of the questions that were submitted, and we probably will not be able to address all of the questions that come in through chat, but we hope that the topics that we selected will cover some of the major points that you're interested in hearing about today. But please remember that there are conversations with the candidates that is happening on CommunOT, and we certainly invite your questions and your dialogue with the candidates through CommunOT. So with all of that, let's get started this evening. And I'd like to begin by introducing our candidate for president-elect, Allison Stover. And Allison, to kick things off, I'd like to ask you what you think AOTA could do to spotlight occupational therapy as a solution to some of the current social justice challenges that we're seeing in our society. And perhaps with that, you can weave in some of the unique perspectives that you bring into your leadership role in AOTA. So Allison, I invite you now.
Sure. Thank you, Sherry. And thank you everyone who is joining us this evening. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with all of you and hear from some of the other candidates for other positions. This is a great question because one of my passions has always lied with this ideal that occupational therapy is the main and best solution to all of the world's problems and all of the many issues that we confront day to day. I think that one of the greatest opportunities that we have through AOTA is the amazing networking capabilities to engage various resources like news outlets, various newspapers and websites and other organizations really tell our occupational therapy story. I think that in and of itself, it's very difficult to get that story out in small capacity. But as an organization that supports the profession nationally, we can really look at ways that say, how can we support our state organizations? How can we support our students, our clinicians? How can we support those in academia, our research scientists, get their stories out, not just in our local arenas, but in arenas that are going to impact what the entire nation is able to see. I have a class that I teach at the University of Pittsburgh in which we have this incredible assignment that says, pick an article from a newspaper, any newspaper, and newspapers all across the nation are represented. And with that, students must write a letter to the editor. That letter to the editor has to address the issue that's presented in the newspaper article and talk about how this really impacts individuals' ability to participate in occupations that are meaningful and purposeful to them. And then how can occupational therapy as a profession really support individuals to the solution to the issue that's addressed in that newspaper article? It's incredible how many of those students get their letters to the editor published, and then how many of those students then engage people in their local community that say, hey, I read your letter to the editor in that newspaper, and I never knew that that was something occupational therapy could do. I never understood occupational therapy beyond just an individual and could really impact entire populations and communities. And so I think what we can really utilize are the incredible collaborations, relationships, and national outreach that AOTA already has to really enhance those stories that are existing and occurring every day in all of our lives as occupational therapy practitioners and students and educators and research scientists. I also think another way that we can really spotlight is by identifying areas that occupational therapy has been strong even prior to some of the more recent spotlights that have been shed on some of the social injustices that we're experiencing in the nation today. So things like our occupational profile, ways that we just get to know our clients at the individual group and community and population level is something that we've utilized pretty much, whether it's been formally or informally, since the beginning of our profession. That occupational profile really encompasses things like, what does your social environment look like? What does your background really entail? What's important to you? What's meaningful to you? What represents you? And then what are some of the barriers and facilitators related to those? These are things that have always existed within this great profession. Now's the time to release those stories and those resources and those very distinct value to our profession to a larger audience. People are listening now, and more people than the physicians that we are used to engaging with. more people than just the medical and healthcare practitioners that we're used to engaging with. People want to know what resources are out there to address some of the various issues that we are experiencing day in and day out. We have some of those resources in unique and innovative ways. And so with these individuals listening and with the unique collaborations and relationships that AOTA already has nationally, combined with being able to reach forward and make really strong unions with our state associations, I think we're at a prime time to really spotlight and highlight that occupational therapy is more than just a partner to physical therapy, that we actually have an incredible and varied amount of benefit that we can give to individuals in our nation as a whole. The other piece to that is that, you know, we look at occupations as meaningful and purposeful. So oftentimes people will say, how do you get someone to participate in your interventions? Or how is it that you own a clinic and you're working with rural adolescents who are encountering all kinds of mental health and behavioral health challenges? How do you get them to even show up every week, right? Well, we get them to show up the same way you all get them to show up. And that's through meaningful and purposeful occupation that they've identified. And so, you know, I really think that the way that we can get people to show up to our solutions is by ensuring that we can show them that we're presenting solutions that are meaningful and purposeful to individuals and the community at large.
Thank you, Allison. Your passion certainly comes through in your comments. We really appreciate that you're taking the opportunity to highlight this issue. I'd like to now turn to our vice presidential candidates and let me introduce them. Joining us tonight is Arame Anveradze, Brent Braveman, and Tim Holmes. And for each of the vice presidential candidates, we have 4 questions that we will pose to all of them. Each of them will have 2 minutes to respond. And I'd like to start off with a general question to all 3 of you. AOTA, like most organizations today, will need to face considerable challenges, lots of changes, and we really need to find new ways of looking at how we deliver value to our members and to the profession. So what experiences and unique perspectives do you think you bring to this leadership role that you're pursuing right now that will help facilitate AOTA's efforts in this transformational period? And Arame, I'd like to begin with you.
Thank you so much, Sherry, and thank you everyone for being on. I'm so excited to have this town hall. I see so many wonderful and familiar faces in the, I guess we can say, audience. One of the things I guess I want to share is that I am a passionate person who believes in creating impact and inspiring others to be action-oriented in organizing and mobilizing change. And so because that is my belief, my career choices and volunteer leadership have been focused on impact, inspiration, and action. And so I'm currently the director of admissions and associate professor at USC in Los Angeles. And I envisioned holistic admissions at USC when I started last year. And I am so proud to say that my team and I established this, and we're moving into our 2nd cycle of it. So this clearly shows action. And within AOTA, I'm currently serving as the Credentials, Rules, and Accountability Chair, where one of my main roles is to support leadership development within the Representative Assembly. And I'm also a member of the Governance Committee. And to really answer your question, being part of the Governance Committee and the liaison between the Governance Committee and the DEI Task Force, I believe this role is so significant in creating a more efficient, effective, and transparent AOTA. But more importantly, it also positions me to be vocal about the importance of having diverse voices represented in the decision-making processes and structures. So I also have served on several other committees and task force, such as being the California rep for 6 years for the Representative Assembly, being on the entry-level doctorate committee, task force, and numerous committees. So that is just some of the way that I am positioned to show value, add value, contribute to the conversations that we're having about the future of AOTA, and really what we're looking at as far as governance and structure.
Thank you, Arame. Brent, would you like to address this topic?
Sure, thank you. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's really exciting to be here with everyone. A thing that I've learned over the 35 years of my career, in fact, I was just reading it today in a book chapter that I was editing, is the one constant that we all faced is change. And through 35 years in the profession, through economic crashes, through downturns, through legal challenges that the association has faced, one thing that I've learned is that tough times leads to creativity. A great example was when I was Speaker of the Representative Assembly we had a last economic crash, and AOTA lost a large percent of its investments. And we were faced with having to do things differently. So the president at that time and I, Penny Morias and I, agreed that we would take the RA meeting that was normally face-to-face and move that totally online, saving AOTA about $150,000. With the COVID crisis that we're in right now, I currently manage a large department in a large medical center. And we are having to learn how to do lots of things differently, like we're doing tonight, in terms of technology, different ways of coming together to learn and to share. And while technology presents us with some challenges, I think that some of these changes are here to stay. And one of the advantages that we can glean is that it will allow us as AOTA leaders to be much more engaged with AOTA members and non-members. And I think being visible, engaged, and active with our members is a key to helping AOTA succeed in terms of serving member needs.
Thank you, Brent. Tim, I'd like to give you an opportunity to address this issue.
Sure. Well, basically, I want everyone to see the value that I see in our professional organization. And I think I do that by setting an example, if you will. So I'm a practitioner. I'm in the clinic every day. By being so involved with AOTA, hopefully I'm trying to, it's not my main intent, but hopefully partially by doing that people that are practitioners in the clinic can see that clinicians, you don't have to be an academician or a scholar to be involved in AOTA, contribute to AOTA, and then get something from AOTA. So one reason that I have liked being involved in our professional organization for so many years in so many different roles is to demonstrate that value, and that and value comes in many forms. It comes in form of a clinician using an official document to go to their administrators to advocate for them. Value comes in, of course, the things that we typically think about: membership, benefits, and this sort of thing, networking. I try to show students and new grads and even experienced people that our professional association is incredibly valuable, but I want other people to see the same value that I see. And I think there are some additional things that we can do. For example, talking about membership, I think it was recently reported that we have about 65,000 members, and not quite half of those are students. And so I want practitioners to see that value and then participate. I want them to give back. So yeah, I just, I try to demonstrate value from all avenues, from leadership activities, from being involved in various committees, from writing articles myself for a special interest section quarterly. So that's a broad goal. But if we set objectives that we want to reach, I think we can use small steps to get towards those objectives.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to turn to an issue that was the subject of many comments that we received from members getting ready for this meeting, and that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is an important issue for AOTA, and it's certainly an important issue for the profession. But members have also commented that to really move forward, AOTA leadership must embody diversity and inclusion. How do you envision advancing a diverse and inclusive leadership within AOTA? I'd like to begin with Brent this time.
Thank you, Sherry. So this is a topic that I've been passionate about for a long time. So I really appreciate the opportunity to address it. When we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, I think there's a couple of things in terms of professional association we need to remember. And first is that we need to remember to use a broad conceptualization of diversity. And so diversity can include race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender, experience. So there's lots of ways that we can promote diversity in our membership and in terms of leadership. We've been working on diversity for a very long time, and we really haven't made many strides. And so I think we have to take a hard look at the entire process of becoming a professional. So we have to collaborate with our schools and with state associations. We have to promote our profession to a diverse audience to recruit practitioners. And then I think it's the responsibility of AOTA leadership to work with our membership to recruit people from diverse backgrounds that represent all those areas of diversity I mentioned, through leadership development programs, through mentorship. We also need, I think we can do a lot to educate our members about issues related to diversity and equity inclusion. Things like education about implicit bias and some of the real strides that are being made in some parts of our society. We need to recognize that our membership reflects our society as at large. And that means that we have people of all political beliefs with very different values. And unfortunately, we also have members who bring biases to their professional practice. So I think heading that head on in a way of working with our membership and creating it as a priority. It needs to be something that we are constantly talking about. I was very, very excited when the AOTA board decided to add inclusion, diversity as a pillar to Vision 2025. I remember being involved in discussions of moving from the Centennial Vision to Vision 2025 and really being concerned about the fact that it wasn't being explicitly stated. So one of the keys, I think, is it needs to be something that we put front and center, that we talk about, and we take the hard challenge of hitting it straight on. And doing those things, I think we can make a real difference.
Thank you, Brent. Tim, I'm going to turn to you.
Sure. So as a practitioner, I think clinicians want tools. They want something tangible. They want something they can kind of sink their teeth into. And I agree with all the things that Brent just mentioned, without a doubt. And then what, right? So what does that look like? For me personally, and this is how I would operate as a vice president, is initially a lot of self-reflection. Not just attending a continuing education activity, which is certainly a good method, but first taking inventory of my own issues. And as a middle-aged white Southern male, I've done a lot of that lately. And some of it is uncomfortable. And I think we need to get uncomfortable at times. I think that spurs change. So, and so what do? Well, I do a lot of self-reflection. I've done, along with the continuing education and, reviewing official documents, but what does that look like in terms of implementing strategies for diversity, equity, and inclusion? And the clearest example is on a day-to-day basis. When I go into someone's room, I'm going to be faced with everything that I read in the chart. what I see when I walk into the room, that initial contact, that initial visual presentation, and then I have to be open. I have to go, well, I initially had these thoughts, but I'm going to put them on the table. I'm going to see what happens and be open to how things evolve. And I think that's kind of a good example of what the organization needs to do, is a lot of self-reflection. What are the things we've done in the past and how do we move forward? What does it look like? But then there are very tangible things, some other tangible things too. So if we as practitioners want to know how our practice is affecting clients, sit down with them and have a conversation. I recently did a survey on the rehab unit where I retired from a couple of years ago. And I did a survey on spirituality and religion and its impact on the rehab process. And people are most willing to talk to you about these kinds of things if we just take the opportunity to listen. And I think we could do the same thing about issues related to culture and race and all the other kinds of factors that come into play. Is have a clinician do a survey and so how could we have helped you better? What were we insensitive about? What did we include? How did we make you feel, or did we help you feel valued and respected? And so those are just some ideas. I mean, my first real wake-up call was probably my time in the Army, where I was really exposed to colleagues from all backgrounds.
Thank you, Tim. Arame.
Thank you so much for this question. Now, we know by the recent AOTA workforce and salary survey that our DEI numbers have not really increased. African American and Indigenous OT groups have actually decreased in the last 5 years, and Latinx and multi-ethnic practitioners have slightly increased. So clearly we have a problem, which is why you've probably received several questions about this. So if there continues to be a lack of representation, our underrepresented communities will continue to be impacted and gaps to health disparities will increase. However, I am encouraged and I'm very hopeful that OT will make a huge impact in this area. Our profession is so powerful when it comes to serving our communities. Now, some areas that I'm encouraged about are that we have leaders and organizations like MDI, the DEI Task Force, the Governance Committee that is looking at ways to thread DEI in bylaws and policies, and of course, COTAD, that are focusing on DEI in occupational therapy. Now, I also think the commitment to this work can't be when there's a trend about social justice. The commitment has to be long-standing. It has to be action-oriented. It has to be fused in policies that must be recreated to serve all people and populations. And this includes AOTA policies. It also means that there needs to be a diverse representation at the table, like myself, contributing to the dialogue when choices are being made for underrepresented groups, or even when they are forgotten to be brought up in the conversation. Now, of course, as the co-founder and now the chair of COTAD, I create and I implement DEI programming that has impacted and will continue to impact the profession at an education level, at a clinical level, at a research level, with students, our communities, and through advocacy. Programs such as the COTAD chapters and the Ignite series, being in the conversation when legislation had to pass about allied health professions and increasing diversity, being in the conversations about Vision 2025, having a pillar to have inclusivity, and being in the discussion with entry-level doctorate, impacting diversity, are just to name a few. Now, I do believe that there are a few areas that we can focus on specifically and start thinking about in this way. One being education, which I like to call holistic education. Being very intentional about how we recruit, how we're looking at holistic admissions, how we're looking at pedagogy, how we're looking at accreditation standards. Are we looking at discrimination in fieldwork, faculty representation, curriculum discussions, and case studies, just to name a few, in our education? When I also look at things like practice, I look at holistic practice, which includes occupation and justice. So looking through a macro lens as practitioners, We have a responsibility to understand how injustices impacts occupations and the daily lives of the individuals we serve. We have to reflect on the systemic barriers marginalized people in our country face and the relationship between occupational justice and injustice. And I'm so proud to say, I believe the two authors of this amazing article, Dr. LaValle and Dr. Johnson, I believe they're on here tonight. They recently published an article about occupation, injustice, and racism in the United States. And they specifically analyze the history of racism in this country and how it impacts occupations. And I really believe by understanding this history, we can become more aware of the implicit and unconscious biases that we have that are very interconnected when we talk about diversity in a multifaceted way. And lastly, when we talk about healthy communities and how occupational therapy has a role in building healthy communities, population health and injustices have impacted our communities through policies, through practices, through healthcare, through wealth gaps, through war on drugs, through education. It's all very intimately connected. And our role as occupational therapists is to also distinguish the occupational barriers and injustices and be advocates for all people to have access to a healthy community. And to take it a step further, I believe this is even more so why it is important to have diverse representation at the table, to advocate for policies and laws that may be created to reinforce these barriers. And having representation in governance, sharing lived experiences and narratives is significant in including diverse voices at the table. In addition, as practitioners, by understanding the relationship between systemic barriers and occupational justice, we can better be connected and between unhealthy communities and health disparities. We can better be equipped in how to work with communities who have been impacted in this way. And I believe that if we better prepare ourselves and equip ourselves, we will be better practitioners and a very powerful profession.
Thank you, Arami. I'd also like to ask the three candidates, in addition to diversity, equity, inclusion, what do you see as the major focus or a major focus for AOTA for the next 3 years? And since we're getting a little tight on time, please keep your answers to 2 minutes. And I'd like to begin with Tim.
Sure, I'll make it quick. I think one of the, from a professional standpoint, I think one of the biggest issues is showing other people the value of what we do, the efficacy of what we do. I mean, my mantra is almost, I want the society to demand our services. And I think what will help that is practitioners connecting with researchers and vice versa, forming collaborative relationships so that we continue to prove our worth and then have people understand the value that we bring to the table. So when there are issues with clients and communities, a physician or a referring practitioner thinks about us in the very beginning as opposed to waiting for someone else to kind of hand off OT or we're kind of a second thought. I want us to be forefront, and I think what's going to help with that is continued research and then clinicians being able to use that research as practitioners.
Thank you, Tim. Arami, and then we'll go to Brent.
So you're asking what the challenges are for AOTA and what we can do. Can you read?
No. What other major issues do you think needs to be a focus for AOTA in the next 3 years, in addition to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think, we have to actualize the tenets of our Vision 2025, but I think the major issues, in addition to DEI, which is the top, is restructuring governance, protecting our reimbursement and really becoming an action-oriented association. And I think as we're restructuring governance, we're going to be looking at a completely different type of AOTA, one that may have completely different structure, may have completely different policies and bylaws and ways that we're making decisions for the future of our profession. So that will help us actualize our tenets even more for Vision 2025. And also, besides DEI, which I have to still bring up, increasing diverse representation is key for our association, and protecting our reimbursement is always top of mind as we're looking at the future of occupational therapy and its value in our nation. And then, of course, one thing that I believe moving forward and as generations to come, what they're looking for in this association is that this association is action oriented and can make decisions and execute them in a timely, efficient, and effective manner.
Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Sherry. So when I think about challenges for our association, I think about two realms. We have to have an eye to the external. So we have to think about legislative changes, opportunities and threats, our need for advocacy in the area of reimbursement and other policies that affect occupational therapy practice. We've had some great victories recently, but there's great opportunities in terms of ensuring that we are able to practice in the area of telehealth beyond the end of the health emergency. The new area, new opportunities in home health because of the recent home health legislation that was passed. So there's always going to be external opportunities and threats that we need to pay attention to. So that's one big area of need that's going to be ongoing. The other, and I'll mention that the vice president is primarily responsible for strategic planning and for activities related to Vision 2025. So I think those external opportunities are key responsibility of the vice president. Second, though, we have to pay attention internally. And I think a big challenge that's going to continue is meeting member needs. Members want to know that leadership really gets their everyday experience. They have practical daily needs for information and support. They face unrealistic pressures for productivity and documentation. They're worried about the changes in reimbursement. We have OTAs practicing in areas that are markets that are saturated. We have practitioners who have lost their job. We have practitioners who are worried about losing their job. We have new graduates who can't find jobs. And these are practical, real life situations that members want to know that the leadership and AOTA cares about. So I think that the next 3 years is going to be a time when we need to be able to work down multiple paths. And I think the great thing, my approach to leadership is to constantly remind people that it's not an either or decision. We can do both. We have the energy, we have the creativity, we have the resources to pay attention to these external opportunities and threats, as well as really taking care of our member needs and their practical, real life experiences.
Oops. Thank you, Brent. We're getting a little bit tight on time and we are getting a few questions in. So I'd like to actually move on to the director candidates since we have 8 candidates that are participating tonight, and hopefully we'll be able to come back to all of the candidates and pose some questions or some opportunities for each of them to close out. So if I could now turn and introduce our candidates who are running for director positions, and I will introduce them in alphabetical order. Sarah Bream, Bridget Desport, Victoria Garcia Wilborn, Julie Kalahar, Sarah McKinnon, Winifred Schultz-Krohn, Lauren Sponseller, Susan Tucker. In addition, Shannon Lewandowski, who is also a candidate for a director position, is unable to participate tonight, and she asked us to convey that she's very thankful to be an OT practitioner who just today had access to the COVID vaccine and was feeling under the weather, so she was unable to join us this evening. So as we turn to our director candidates, we're going to have a few questions that we're going to ask the entire group and a couple of questions that we're going to limit to half the group. Let me begin by a question for all of the group. What steps can AOTA take to have a real impact on diversity, equity, and inclusion within the profession? And I'm going to begin with Sarah Bree. Sarah?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. First off, thank you to AOTA for hosting this event. And thank you to all the attendees for your engagement in this very important process. In terms of implementing these necessary ideas and important ideas around diversity, equity, and inclusion, the profession needs they need a tangible plan. And I think from my perspective, things begin with recruitment. And I think as a profession, AOTA, the leadership can be instrumental in facilitating things on a broad level. Historically, academic programs may have tended to compete. And I think this is such a crucial endeavor that we need to really work together. And I think with the leadership working together to create these collaborations across programs, we can utilize best practices from institutions that are doing it well. So in terms of what are the best practices related to recruitment into our academic programs of underrepresented minorities, and how can we transfer that knowledge and those strategic efforts across the profession to make a really important impact? So I think what the profession needs, we've heard a theme this evening around transformation, and it seems to me that the profession is really at a pivotal point in terms of a significant change that needs to happen on multiple levels with the profession. The diversity, equity, inclusion piece is huge. In addition to the academic programs, at the recruitment level, it's looking at the curriculum. It's implementing hands-on changes in those curriculum and partnering with ACOTE to make some of that happen. And in terms of tangible plans, it could be solutions such as, are there benchmarks that we need to implement across the profession? And how do we go about doing that as a collective in really making an impact on increasing diversity? And also taking a look at how are we, in addition to those things, how can we start to eliminate the systemic racism that has been occurring at the levels of research, practice, and education, and taking a hard look at the association itself. So the government, the policies and bylaws, procedures. So, we are at the brink of transformation, and I think it's important to look to leaders that have the capacity to really take bold ideas and implement them into tangible, sustainable, bold actions.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to move on to Bridget.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out this evening and joining us. I think it needs to start with AOTA recognizing that the organization has a culture. And when you recognize that you have a culture, then you want to actually take steps to change that culture. So yes, we are talking a lot about transformation, but in order to do that, we have to all be able to come to the table and ask questions. And then when we ask those questions, those that are in a position to make those changes have to actually listen and want to integrate that information. And as I said, make concrete steps to change. So we're at a point in our, the structure of our association, because I've been with this profession for a long time, and it's lovely to see that it's a lot more heterogeneous than it was years ago. And it's starting to move to this direction of inclusivity. But again, I think that we just, it comes with actually wanting to make changes to the actual culture that presently exists.
Thank you, Bridget. I'd like to move on to Victoria, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all of you for tuning in tonight. I would like to point out that throughout this night, there has been one word that has been missing, and that is belonging. AOTA needs to create a culture of belonging in regards to diversity and inclusion. Historically, we come from a recruitment effort of white, single, middle-class women. And if we are looking to move past that norm, we have to have leadership with a diverse background. Many of our members are first-generation college attendees like myself. And so in order for us to understand the experience of those that may not come from privileged backgrounds, we need to have those who did not come from privileged backgrounds in leadership. Having such will create a more robust ability to make decisions and to quickly pivot in times of change. So therefore, I feel like I can bring many different lived aspects of my experience to our leadership board for more adequate representation so that we can create a culture of belonging in the profession of occupational therapy.
Thank you, Victoria. Julie.
Good evening. I wanted to start out with addressing the topic by talking about the DEI task force that AOTA has just initiated, along with several policies that are going before our federal government right now that are to assist with people from underrepresented populations being able to achieve an educational experience. One of the other things I wanted to point out too was with that, and before I talk about what I would definitely like to bring to the table, is that the Institute of Medicine cites that individuals have better outcomes when they are served by individuals who come from the same ethnic or racial background as they do. I think diversity, of course, enriches our communities and would enrich our community as a profession, as well as help to educate people on preconceptions that they may have had in the past, improving critical thinking and improving communication, but making our whole communities, not just our OT community, that feeling of belonging that person just brought up here a second ago. The American Council on Higher Education identifies that there's a significant percentage of people from these underrepresented populations achieving an educational degree. As you look at the associate degree, it's again primarily a degree that is to the Caucasian population. But if you continue to look up to bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, doctoral degrees, that percentage for the underrepresented populations goes down. And so continuing the support of the entry level for occupational therapy being multi-degree leveled would only assist in being able to increase the pool of people from underrepresented populations into our profession, so that then we would then have a wealth of a pool of people who would be able to move into leadership positions. And so in addition, one more thing I would say is that I would want to help with being able to initiate steps to take steps within our profession to promote more scholarship availability to persons from underrepresented populations, and more specifically scholarships to people who are going into the profession at the associate or the bachelor's level who are from underrepresented populations.
Thank you, Julie. Sarah McKinnon.
Hello and good evening. My name is Sarah McKinnon. I'm joining you today from Boston, Massachusetts. Thank you very much for joining us. I have very much appreciated the town hall forums that have increased over the past few months. One more modality for us to all come together as a community. So DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has become a common nomenclature for many organizations that has been highlighted primarily, I think, due to the systemic racism that is not new to our country or our world, but that has been highlighted in recent months due to the abundance of crime and violence. So I want to acknowledge that although this has been challenging our profession, it's coming to the forefront, I believe, because of of a lot of the issues that have been coming up over the past year. So I do just want to acknowledge that prior to addressing DEI, I want you to know that I have been educated by colleagues to put justice first. And so there's this a new emerging acronym that I've heard and now have been trying to live called JEDI. So justice first, JEDI, equity, diversity, and then inclusion in that order. So how we instill these values as an association must always be transparent and, like others have said tonight, action-oriented. I think there are two ways that we as an association can work towards meeting the objectives of DEI or JEDI. In the long term, of course, it's diversifying our work pool. And I think there are many strategies that people have of where to start, whether it's in high schools or the college applicant pool or educating our communities about our profession, just to name a few. Additionally, I think in the short term, we have the opportunity to influence our profession and the stakeholders that we have right now. And that is through training of the students that we have, whether it's through ACOTE or through curriculum of entry-level programs, but also educating our practitioners. And that could be through post-professional education or through continuing education through our association. In my role as a program director of a post-professional OTD program, we sought to develop a course to meet the needs of our practitioners who are out there unsure how to navigate these conversations and complex issues in their workplace. In fact, one assignment is to actually address an action plan for how our practitioners can make changes within their organization. It's something that I'm very proud of and something that I think our association can do as well. My last point related to DEI and training is to acknowledge that there are many resources that are available to members that we pay for, but there are also many resources that are available to anybody. One example would be the Legislative Action Center. I think that any education or training that we create as an association should be accessible to even non-paying members. So as a way to hopefully entice greater membership in the future. Thank you.
Winifred, I'd like to turn to you.
And thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. Winifred Schultz Krohn is really too long and too much of a mouthful. I go by Win, and that's fine. And this is a very passionate issue. Just a little backstory. I have dedicated over 2 decades working with homeless families in California. And in that pro bono service, every family knows about OT. But part of it is also reaching out and making sure that everyone has opportunity to receive OT, whether they can pay for it or not. Now, AOTA, I think, can be a great avenue to try and reach out, not only to diversify our workforce, but the other part of it is to really look at how our services can be made across a wider bandwidth. Right now, we're looking at pay for service. I mean, most of that reimbursement is really an issue. And even when you're looking at how can we diversify our group, we need to invite people. We basically need to not only do the deep listening that has been started with AOTA, but we have to actively go out and ask people to participate in AOTA. Those invitations, those opportunities are out there. And we have amazing skilled people of diverse backgrounds, but they're very busy. And if we can carve out a way that we can support them, if we can carve out a way of providing opportunities for them to start that road of joining AOTA, of being part of AOTA, of having their voices at the table. But part of that, a big part of it needs to be the AOTA asking those people, and not just the listening, but asking those people, acting on their suggestions and having them as part of the process. And in doing that, it's really that trying to build an inclusive opportunity. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Win. Lauren, I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak right now.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for this time. My background, I'm in Philly, Pennsylvania. I have a pro bono practice that serves breastfeeding families. So my passion is family wellness. And it is really, there is a increase in, well, if you don't know, the infant mortality and maternal mortality in our country is also alarming. And it's a passion area of mine. And I bring that up because so often that it has been on the forefront for the last 5 years for me in Philly to support minority women to increase their breastfeeding rates and also have support during the birth process. So in looking at that, in my other position as chair of the OT program at Salus University, we have, the students are very active in this program, but also we've looked at ways just as a whole, because I have yet to come across a year that so many people have said, I know what OT is. I'm so happy for your services. I normally get met with, what is OT? And so, you know, as an association, I think that it is looking at the communities that we're in, which is a lot of communities, and bringing awareness to the field of OT and starting at a really young level. We also partner with the YMCA, the Greater Philly Y, and are in supporting their community programs and giving access to the families and all free services, but we are bringing in walkers, wheelchairs, other devices, and letting the children have, in a sense, a STEM type session to get a feel for OT, but it's bringing awareness. And I think that as the association, so many of my fellow nominees have said so many great ideas that of course are on my list too, but I think to really, when I think of the association as a whole, I think that we need to look at the nation and really see how we can make an impact with, someone else has brought up population health, and where can we see and support our practitioners in areas that they're doing great work, not being reimbursed, but having this impact on the community that ultimately helps people of all backgrounds, and furthermore has a greater impact legislation-wise, supporting the academic programs, because we can certainly talk about marketing to or educating the academic programs on removing GREs and what the stats look like with that, or an interview process, all these different requirements, understanding the value of community college. You know, for my background, I also did start as an occupational therapy assistant. And so I come with the understanding of having the background of being a treating clinician and very much holding on to the mindset that as a profession, or as an association, we need to be talking to OT practitioners and really not separating the OT and the OTA, and making an impact in the field as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. And Susan, I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak to this issue.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. And hello, everyone. Greetings from Oklahoma. And thank you for the opportunity to address this really important topic that we're all passionate about, as we've heard tonight. One step that I would add that I think AOTA can take is being very intentional with being transparent about what's happening, what we're doing, what accomplishments are being made in terms of our action plans or programs that are in place for addressing DEI. So, you know, we have the technology, and let's use it, and maybe through social media, we can get some information out. Perhaps articles in OT practice that really highlight what's happening in this task force and what are some of the action steps, and how can I provide input if I'm reading that article. Maybe a feature on the website that drives our members and others to look at what is AOTA doing about this issue that's an important topic for so many of us. And having that information on the website, accessible, transparent, so anyone can read it, look at it, and then a contact for how can I provide input, how can I ask questions. Town hall events, these have been so successful. The pandemic has sort of pivoted us in the way we interact with others, but such effective ways. Maybe YouTube videos, whatever ways in which we can connect with members, TikTok, another way in which we can get that message out about what we're doing, and make that a two-way street. I think there needs to be dialogue and an opportunity to get input, because we have magnificent ideas, as we've heard tonight, in so many ways that individuals can make a difference and improve the progress that we're making as an association. So thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I'd like to turn to another issue, and we're going to divide the group and have half responding to this and half responding to our next issue. And I'd like to begin with asking our candidates for director, what do you see as some of the major challenges for the profession that AOTA needs to address in the next 1 to 3 years? And I'd like to begin with Lauren.
Thank you, Sherry. So is there a limit to how many challenges? I guess I have to go to my 2-minute limit. I think that at the forefront, not having prepared for this question, I heard someone else mention market saturation. And, you know, as someone that is working with new grads and hearing their struggles, or more recently hearing former colleagues being furloughed, I think that one of the areas that the profession really does have to analyze and support is the whole the issue of that jobs are difficult right now, which then further lends itself to the realities of the academic programs having significant challenges within their clinical programming and field work. It's a cycle. We're putting a lot of pressure on the clinicians out there, and they're feeling it. They're doing a huge service by supporting the students, but in the same sense, they're extremely stressed. So I think that in the sense of, it's kind of twofold. One, in supporting the academic programs to better understand where these new programs are starting up. And I certainly, being an ACOTE member myself and a reviewer, I understand that we're speaking about the association, but certainly this has an impact on our stakeholders. And, you know, along the same lines, reimbursement and legislation at the state levels, every state, I'm hearing talks of practice acts being open, and what the fear is within different states, competing professions, perhaps, you know, adding activities of daily living to their scope of practice. And there's concern for the practitioners who are already concerned about their jobs, really taking ownership, which leads to really creating better awareness of our profession and the impact and the outcomes that we have in all these settings. And although there's certainly great research and articles out there, really being a force and partnering with other organizations, networking across other professions to better have an impact as awareness as to the importance of OT. Thank you,
Lauren. I'd like to address the same question and give Sarah McKinnon a chance to respond.
Hello, and thank you. I think that we have 3 big challenges that I can try to address. The first is addressing the long-term effects of the pandemic, whether that's on our student academic programs, practice and practitioners, and our society. So the first, as some of our academics or clinical educators in the room can attest to, is that our clinical education system is in need of reform. What that looks like, I think, takes more conversation than just a 1 2-minute answer right now. But academic programs are struggling, suffering in terms of clinical placement, and that is an area that we can address as an association. In terms of practice and the pandemic, we need to identify interprofessional collaborations amongst our therapy friends or our other medical, psychology, education colleagues for helping to manage the long-term impacts of COVID, whether that's physical, mental, or developmental. Our children, many of them are out of school and have completely changed how they are learning and developing. And then the last has to do with society. The mental health of our practitioners, clients, caregivers, educators, and just the general population is calling for a holistic profession such as occupational therapy to address their needs. We can do that in the next 3 to 5 years. In addition to the pandemic, one of my biggest areas for growth personally and professionally, and something that we can do as an association, is in terms of legislative reform. We are entering into a whole new opportunity within our political and economic climate that our association has the power with our fabulous federal affairs team to make change. We need to see those trends like they do, they being the Federal Affairs Department and our association, but more than just reimbursement and the modalities such as telehealth, but expanding our scope to address, again, mental health, some of clinical education, diversifying our profession, just to name a few examples. I could go on for this for a long time. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie.
Hoping I can kind of bring a little bit of a new something new to it, but I believe in a lot of the things that Sarah was just talking about. But COVID was my first one, obviously. Being an educator of occupational therapy assistants for the last 23 years, I am definitely seeing, and also see it with my other colleagues who are in university settings and such. But this is going to resonate for years. It's not going to be a one and done type of a situation. This is going to cause some impact over time and won't be done, and it won't be over simply because of an immunization. And so I do think that there are some broken pieces, obviously, in our educational system on how we handle our clinicals and things like that. But I'll move on to a couple of the other challenges I think that are happening too. Definitely legislation, especially there were some small gains here in December with the Medicare reimbursement reduction. Of course, thank goodness for AOTA, and that did come up with some bright spots. However, we're still dealing with some fallout from some reimbursement issues for COTAs, which was not very long ago. And that is reverberated into all of the OT world. It doesn't just affect OTAs, but is affecting OTs as well. And sometimes I feel like that we come from a position of, someone had mentioned how diverse all of our practice settings are. And sometimes we think, well, if it's not affecting my practice setting, then I'm not going to, it doesn't affect my practice setting. So I'm not going to go forward and do something like advocate for my colleagues who are working in a different practice setting. I feel like that divide and conquer situation has been going on for a long time. And so internally, I think we definitely need to take some of the steps that are already out there that AOTA has offered, but also, again, going towards our states and making sure that we are all supporting each other. If I'm not a mental health practitioner, I certainly want to support mental health practitioners. I'm in pediatrics, but geriatrics is being affected. I want to support geriatric occupational therapy. And so I don't think it's a divide and conquer. I think we need to all adhere and help.
Thank you, Julie. And Bridget, I'd like to ask you to address this question as well.
I think we have one main challenge, and it's been the challenge I think that has been consistent throughout our profession, and that's maintaining relevance and significance. And the way that we can maintain that is if we have different and unique representation in leadership positions. You'll probably notice I tend to avoid the words minority or underrepresented, and that's intentional, because those designations are indicative of me being an other, and I don't consider myself an other, or I don't consider myself a minority to anyone. So I tend to avoid that type of language. Now, students are our ambassadors. And I think that we need to start there. So similar to Arame, that I was a student admissions coordinator for the occupational therapy program. And we did a lot of recruitment to make sure that we had unique representation in our program. And it's not difficult. And it's a conversation that I think AOTA keeps having, but is not really sure how to, or programs, I should say, are not really sure how to take those steps, but it's not a difficult process. The other thing that we need to do is transform our educational curricula. And that is something that I think will start with the board of directors and conversations with ACODE. And again, we are at this forefront of actually making that concrete change. And another point that I want to make as far as I was saying, that students are our ambassadors, is that we need to create more pipeline opportunities for our students while they're in programs. As Brent was saying, that our students are having difficulty finding employment, and we can connect our students with more national organizations. I am a board member of the National Perinatal Association, and through that, we've been able to help our students connect with employment opportunities. So again, just really finding opportunities of connecting with other organizations that are beyond AOTA.
Thank you, Bridget. I'd like to turn to a slightly different issue, and that's to ask a few of the candidates, how do you envision AOTA engaging more practitioners, non-academicians in the organization? This has been a challenge for us for quite a while, and an issue that we hope to turn to. So I'd like to first begin by asking Susan Tucker.
Right, hello again. And this has been a opportunity that we have had as AOTA members, is how to get everyone else on board with what we recognize as a great organization that's doing great things on behalf of all of us. And I think one thing that will work well is to strengthen our mentoring program and the way we mentor and guide those around us. Several of us have opportunities to interact with students as they're developing as professionals, but practitioners that are working in the clinics, to have some mentor that is someone who can talk with them about how AOTA has benefited practice, how AOTA has made changes in legislation that have impacted reimbursement, as an example. So having that connection with someone, I think, is a strength, rather than just tossing out information. And we're really, really good at that, but we've got to make sure it sticks. And we need to understand, why are you not a member? And that's probably a simple question, and get some data on that. I know we've done a variety of surveys, so we have some information that perhaps we can identify some strategies so that we can strengthen that incentive so that someone will want to be a part of AOTA. But I think that mentorship, that identification with somebody who can help explain that would be a great place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Wynn, I'd like to address this issue to you as well.
And thank you very much. And I think one individual had mentioned that one of the strengths are the students, and really looking at how students are able to see their opportunity and their actual action changing what's happening within the profession. So with that kind of very collaborative and intentional action, and having students and practitioners see themselves as changing how the profession is viewed and being those agents of change. But what that will require is giving an avenue for that to occur. And part of it is the invitation, but it's also a matter of how, when you're talking about whether it's students, when you're talking about practitioners, and finding out how we can equip people not only to be those agents of change, but also how we can assist individuals to become those agents of change that they see within their practice, within their day-to-day world. Because those agents of change are out there already. But how we can support that, how we can really celebrate that, is part of what I think would assist in having people feel more of, I think it was Victoria said, a sense of belonging, that we're part of a community, we're part of a profession, and all practitioners can be part of that. And it can be in a small way or it can be in a large way, but all of us are part of it. But are we all recognized? Are we all supported? And are we all given that opportunity to really expand and be part of what we see the future of AOTA and the future of occupational therapy, where we see that future going? And I saw in the chat that there was a lot of discussion about mental health, and that even though I'm a pediatric occupational therapist and an academician, mental health has always been a critical part. And even seeing how those changes can occur, I think is critical. So those are some of the things that I think I envision OT in really trying to recognize and have practitioners be those change agents. Thank you.
Thanks, Wynn. Victoria.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to answer this question. I often scratch my head at this because I think I have a unique perspective. I am the current chairperson for the Affiliated State Association of Presidents, and state presidents are some of the fiercest leaders I know. They are practitioners often. They mobilize efforts at the very grassroots level with limited budgets. Much of their boards are practitioners doing practice day in and day out, and they are dedicated to the cause of advancing the profession at the state level. And I'm also seeing several groups mobilize virtually. There are several different occupational therapy resource groups utilized on Facebook. I find much solidarity on Twitter, different platforms. And so I'm asking myself, how is AOTA missing the mark in engaging members in a way that makes us feel valued, known, seen, and heard? Not only for practitioners, but for would-be practitioners. Obviously, that's students, for those thinking about entering the profession. There is some disconnect, and we must be intentional about finding out what that disconnect is. It's beyond value. It's belonging, yes, but it's also needing to have tangible benefits as members to a national association. Now, those of us that are readily volunteering, we understand the value that belongs, or that we have, and we have a sense of belonging as far as legislative efforts or different volunteer committees, but this has to extend outside a select few. Right? This has to be a place, an association in which practitioners at all levels feel as if there is some sort of tangible benefit, an easy benefit for us to have. A very simple suggestion could be mobilizing our platform to an AOTA app. How can I best utilize evidence in a way that is convenient? I can pull up my AOTA app. I can look for an article. I can reference a best practice guideline in a very tangible manner. We have to think creatively about engaging newer members, practitioners, and those that we would like to recruit into our profession.
Thank you, Victoria. Sarah Bream.
Thank you. To piggyback off of the ideas that have already been shared, I think it's really important that we need to think about contemporary society in terms of contemporizing the association itself. So it's important that we are relevant to all the stakeholders within the organization, outside of the organization, and how do we do that? So what's happening in, with contemporary society? How do people communicate? What do people pay attention to? Social media, right, is a key element. Apps, like Victoria mentioned. Bill Wong is facilitating TEDx talks. So there's really unique grassroots efforts that are happening, and it's important that we pay attention to those and potentially mirror those in some ways to really create a broader impact. Practice is contemporizing as well. We're moving into more and more new emerging areas, really capitalizing on our lens of occupation. We are moving into community level and population level interventions where we're really creating that broader impact, and we need to do that as an association as well. And so we need to speak the language of those external stakeholders, and we need to tap into those situations, and we need to be able to communicate effectively. And we also need to remember to capitalize on those within the organization that are already passionate and engaged, and how do we continue to maximize those efforts as well.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to give all of the candidates for the director positions a chance to briefly address what experiences and/or perspectives do you think you bring to the board that you believe are really important for shaping a dynamic future for AOTA and the profession. And Victoria, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you, Sherry. Wow. So where do I start with this question, right? I came to OT in a roundabout sort of way. I was unaware completely of the profession 16 years ago when I started as an OT. But what can I bring to the table? Specific experiences. I received my post-professional degrees as a full-time working practitioner and as a mother of young children. So I think that brings its own set of experience. I've overcome several barriers within my own personal life, but also structurally that were presented before me. I currently lead the State Association of Presidents and bring that level of experience. But I think my strongest asset, actually what my strongest asset is humility. Knowing that I don't know the answer or solution to every problem that we may have, but knowing that I won't take no for an answer, that my no will be not yet. If there is a concern that's brought to the board of directors, I want to be able to address it in a way that is beneficial for all members of AOTA. And if I can't do that, my commitment to you is not yet, because I want to make sure that moving forward, our policies, our oath of our profession, who we are as practitioners, academics, scientists, is well represented and equitable for everyone who wants to be an occupational therapy practitioner. So that is my commitment to you. You can certainly see my CV and all of the awards and accolades. That's the top of the glacier. I think what the bottom of the glacier brings is humility, collaborative team working, and a wealth of experience in change leadership to serve the members of the association and not to be served.
Thank you, Victoria. Sarah McKinnon.
Hello. I am so proud of the many professional roles that I've taken on over the past 11 years of my career. They include working as a clinician across the rehab continuum, primarily with adults in acute care, inpatient rehab, and skilled nursing facilities. And I've also worked to better understand the rehab continuum and that process in case management, clinical liaison, and admissions roles as well. I transitioned to academia, working in post-professional education, primarily due to the gap I saw with clinicians and professional development, and my opportunity to really bridge that gap between academia and clinical practice. So that is one thing that I am proud of, that I'm actively doing, and I love working in innovative ways to have an interprofessional focus of all the different solutions and curriculum that I'm a part of on a large team. My most proud professional role that I've had in terms of service is my 6-year time on the AOT PAC as a board of director for Region 1. And in this role, not only have I grown personally, but I've really been able to encompass networking and relationship building, feeling like I can truly make that ask, not just for money, but for action. And I think that bringing the perspective as a clinician, someone in academia, and also someone with a strong advocacy and legislative background will be exactly some of the things that a board member would need to have to help move many of these wonderful ideas that this group has forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Susan.
Hi again, everyone. I've been an occupational therapist for over 30 years, so I love this profession. And Frank Gaynor used to call me Miss OT, with a sash. So I'm just so passionate about our profession and proud to be a member of it. So you can see from my CV that I'm organized and have excelled in those leadership opportunities that I've been fortunate to be in with AOTA. I would say what I bring to the board is I'm a good listener. I have many people who seek me out because I tend to keep my mouth shut for a while, and it could be my introverted tendencies, but I am a good listener. And what I couple that with is I have a tremendous amount of energy. I'm a runner, so I put that energy into running lots of miles where I can do a lot of thinking and problem solving. And then I like to take action. And so I think that those strengths would be good for the board, and I certainly would put those to use for the benefit of the members of AOTA, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Bridget.
What I would bring to the board of directors is humanity. Similar to Susan, it's important to listen. And I am that person that sits, takes copious notes, takes a climate of the room, and make sure that everyone's voice is heard. As a board member, as an associate dean, an educator, and a clinician, I've been responsible for starting, executing, and sustaining quite a number of initiatives. So I hope to have the opportunity to demonstrate my willingness to work together with others and to work together with other board of directors. And one thing you will get from me is organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Julie.
I guess the way I would start it is I have a servant's heart with a boxer's attitude, and I love puzzles. And so that's kind of how I feel about occupational therapy at times. If you look at my CV, you'll see it comes from a wide variety of servant positions that I've had over the last 20 years with both my state association, AOTA, AOTF. I've also served at the discretion of an AOTA president. And basically my skill set from all of those pieces that I've gotten from all those pieces, I used to be the person who wanted to help. And that is, the very thing I see on applications for students all the time. I want to help. I want to help. I want to hear. I want to do. And then I found my voice in OT, 10 years on the representative assembly, 6 years with AOTF. Again, president of my state. I started an organization for OTAs nationally. It's being initiated this year and hopefully will take off better next year because of COVID, the National Honor Society for OTAs. And I think we all have passion. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have passion. We find our voices. We find voices for others, for those who don't or can't speak up. We do that for them. And that's where my boxer's attitude comes from. All my little pieces have come together, and this is one of the things I'm very, very passionate about in my life. And it's something that I would be very honored to do, and I do feel I can do it. On top of it, I love shoes, and most of my friends in OT world know I absolutely adore shoes. I'm a size 8.5 if you'd like to buy me a pair. I'm also a cyclist. I love my dog and Jeeps, and I'm a Jeep enthusiast, along with my family, friends, my colleagues, and I have a ridiculous sense of humor.
Thank you, Julie. Wynn.
Well, thank you. And there's a couple things that I bring to it. I mean, obviously, you have the literature that was put forth by AOTA, and that goes over my CV. And I've had the real blessing to be serving in AOTA in various capacities, and also served as the state president in Connecticut before moving to California. But I think one of the things that I would bring to AOTA is not only the deep listening, but really collaborative and intentional action. And the nexus of that is really in promotion of others. One of the things that I have been just so proud of is I have had over 100 students that have presented research at AOTA. And it's a lot of me pushing and pushing and pushing, but pushing with gentle nudging. And that's one of the things that I don't give up on people. I'll see something, I'll see some excellence in there. And I'll tell them, now, you may not believe it yet, but you're going to be great. You're going to be amazing. Let me help you get there. Let me help you on your road, because you are just an inspiring person, but you may not feel it yet. And my students always say, you know, you're telling us we have to fake it till we make it. And I go, you don't know you've already made it. I know you've made it. And so part of what I would bring is really recognizing that excellence in others and trying to promote and support people as they're moving through the profession. And that's one of the things that I would bring as a board of director, recognizing if I have this wonderful opportunity, but really with the deep listening and with intentional and collaborative action that I think is so critical to really move the profession forward, but move the profession forward with many visions, not just a singular vision. So thank you.
Thank you, Wynn. Sarah Bream.
Thank you. One of the first reasons I'm running for an AOTA board director position is because I love this profession. And I know that my colleagues on the ballot share in that sentiment. The second reason I'm running for a board position is I really, truly want to contribute to the priorities of the profession and really help to shape the trajectory of occupational therapy for the next decade. And as I previously mentioned, and what we've talked about tonight, is the profession is really on the brink of a pivotal transformation. And we need leaders who can really foster that change across the profession. And the ability to convert bold ideas into sustainable action, and action that results, the action that gives us results. I bring that to the table. An example of converting a bold idea into results was a Centennial Float initiative, where occupational therapy was represented in its 100th anniversary at the annual Rose Parade. This was a grassroots effort that I had the pleasure and honor of leading, sponsored by OTAC, the Occupational Therapy Association of California, and a grassroots effort across the profession with hundreds of contributors. And on that day of our anniversary, we were, occupational therapy was viewed by 73.5 million viewers. And I think that's an example of having the capacity to take a very bold idea and convert it through a feasible implementation plan to create results. And lastly, what I bring to the table is a spirit of collaboration. And a former boss of mine once told me, Sarah, you can work with anyone. And, you know, I think this is a time for collaboration. This is a time for AOTA leadership to really think about ways to foster impactful collaborations to really make the difference in society and really live out our mission in improving the lives of people through occupation around the globe. And so at the root of it will be effective leadership and effective collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Lauren.
Thanks, Sherry. You know, when I decided to run for this position, one, I was truly honored to be accepted and nominated, and definitely feel inspired tonight and feel like I am in the best of the best company. I have served on the state association for Pennsylvania. I have been active in New Jersey. Philly is, I like to call myself a part-time Jersey girl too. So I am active in New Jersey as well. And I feel that it would give me an opportunity to also support all of the efforts that I've heard from so many stakeholders. Personally, I have served in the role of caregiver to my mother, who is a quadriplegic, C3 to C7. So that's given me perspective as a caregiver, also working with clients as an OTA and my very first presentation that I ever did was because I reached out to a faculty member at Misericordia as a clinician and said, can I present at AOTA? I'm a clinician. Is that something that can happen? And she said, yes. Do you have anyone who can help you? And I said, I don't know. I've been, but I always thought it was academics. And so, my presentation was on the pursuit of education. At the time, I was an OTA with my master's in education, and everyone wanted to know why I didn't go and become an occupational therapist. And I think for me, one of the skill sets is that I certainly am a visionary. I am an entrepreneur, but I truly believe where you have a will, there's a way. I was teaching in adjunct positions, and the position that I'm currently in became open 9 years ago. And in the Philly market, at the university that I'm in, you could ride a bike to several other competing programs. So people thought we were crazy to start this program. And I really felt passionate about what we were doing and the curriculum that we were developing, and certainly feel that way with the alumni that we have and the networking that we've created. And so, for me, I think that hearing and listening, I've always continued a clinical practice. I've also been involved in other associations and organizations. And of course, you can see everything on paper, but, I really want to make an impact. And so, again, honored to be here, and thanks for the time.
Thank you, Lauren. As we begin to close up, I would like to give our candidates for the officer position 2 minutes to offer closing remarks on any topic that they like, but 2 minutes. And I'm going to start with Allison Stover. Allison?
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who has not only joined us this evening, but then stayed tight and hung on with us through the conversations. There have been some really great discussions that we've had the opportunity to hear. A lot of what I hear are things about transformation, and that occupational therapy as a profession just really calls to those with a servant heart, and that the leaders really find these ways to serve, and that mentorship is incredibly valuable in our profession. And I agree to all those things, but I think that these are all places that occupational therapy has been and always will be. And so what I value is this opportunity to move forward with where we've been to some new frontiers. So where we were once mentors and mentees, but seeking mentorship to drive change agents and new individuals into our profession, and to encourage opportunities for diverse representation. I don't think we should be just mentors anymore. I think we need to be sponsors. I'm reading this incredible book called A Sojourner's Truth, and in it she talks about Dorothy Vaughan with NASA, and she says, a servant leader can lead from scarcity, and that leading from scarcity makes small changes and exhausts the servant leader. Or a servant leader can lead from abundance that says, look around me at this brilliant and amazing pool of talent that we have. Let's use that and move forward. When Dorothy Vaughan was offered her first promotion within NASA, she said, I'll go, but only If you take my team with me, which was other women of color, other brilliant scientists, right? She served with a servant leadership that was of sponsorship from abundance. That's what I want to look for as a leader myself, and then as AOTA as an organization, and for us all that are members of this incredible profession. Let's move away from being the mentors, those that are serving from scarcity, and let's embrace new opportunities to sponsor, to share in those responsibilities related to growth and development. And sponsorship means I'll teach you, but it means you'll teach me. And it means we get to lead from a place of abundance. That's how we will catapult this profession forward. I think innovation has been talked about and transformation. These are exciting topics. So let's embrace these topics and do more than discuss them, put them into action. Thank you for your time. Thank you, AOTA, for this platform. Thank you, Rebecca and Sherry, for leading the charge in this. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Allison. Arame.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited to be on this with everyone here. I'm excited about AOTA's future and the future of our profession. You know, being action-oriented with diverse representation through restructured governance will make us the premier organization serving our members and communities. And what I will do is mobilize and motivate. I will be confident and I will make important decisions. I will communicate my ideas clearly, present new and bold concepts, and lead with clarity and transparency. More importantly, I have big vision, can see it through, inspire others to see it through, and get it implemented. And this is because I lead with authenticity and stay connected to my core values. And these are the essential traits for a vice president to have in AOTA. So thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to voting opening soon.
Thank you, Arame. Brent.
Thank you, Sherry. First, I want to say congratulations to all of the candidates who are on this evening, and say thank you for taking the risk to put yourself out there in service of our organization. It's the only thing that has moved our professional association forward, and it's the only thing that's going to move us forward given the new challenges that we'll face. I'm running to be the next vice president of AOTA because first and foremost, I have a true passion for occupational therapy. And I have a deep commitment to serving our professional association. I've volunteered for AOTA and the state association wherever I've lived for over 3 decades now. And whether I win as vice president or not, I will continue to offer myself up to service. Because AOTA has been there for the profession, and I believe that we need to be there for AOTA. I'm an ardent supporter of research and knowledge development. I'm not afraid to have the difficult conversations that we sometimes need to have and to face challenges head on. And so I don't think you'll find a more qualified, committed, energetic, more accessible, or more optimistic person. So I hope to have your support. And I thank you for everyone for participating tonight. And again, thanks to all the candidates and congratulations for being willing to serve our professional association.
Thank you, Brent. Tim. Tim, you're muted.
There we go. It fits with what I was just saying in the sense that, you know, sometimes I look around and I kind of wonder how I got here sometimes. I come from a background well, I'll say limited means, limited resources. I come from an area of rural North Carolina where there's a lot of poverty. There are a lot of struggle. I came from a family where my mom didn't finish high school. For the Army was an opportunity for me to get out of that area, to learn, to grow. And then I didn't go to college till after I'd completed a 4-year term in the Army. And then when I got into college, I didn't have the skill set for studying. I had, it was, so I struggled. I struggled early on. I struggled in college. And so I have a certain degree of empathy for struggle personally, and then a certain empathy for how the profession is struggling or our association is struggling. So I think what I think we ought to do is an occupational profile on our association. So we need to step back and look and see what our roles are, what our functions are, what our habits are, what we've done well and what we've not done well. And what I bring is very much like Brent and many others, is a long history of professional leadership in various roles. My term as Vice Speaker for the Representative Assembly ends this spring. And again, like Brent, whether I get elected or not, I'll continue to serve the profession because the profession has served me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I want to thank all of you attending this evening. I want to thank all of the candidates for being available. If there are additional questions that we did not cover tonight, I'm going to ask you to take them to CommunOT, where the candidates will be pleased to offer responses. I hope that you will vote when voting begins tomorrow, and I hope you will encourage your colleagues to participate in the voting process as well. I think all of us know that this is, as we said, a time of transformation, and the challenges that we faced over the last year are going to continue well into 2021. But we've made some remarkable strides, and I think the individuals who have put their names forward for volunteer leadership roles in AOTA represent a transformational future for the organization and for the profession. But this is also a year that we really, really need your active involvement as we push forward, as we deal with challenging issues that are going to take your input and your guidance and your participation. So I hope you will continue to engage with AOTA in voting and in all of our other activities. Thank you again for participating this evening, and we'll look forward to connecting with you very soon. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for
Thank you. Good night. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Right.